workshops, inspiring connection, restore, renew, and reconnect in community. Live well, laugh often, and love much. Join our online connection circles. Be empowered in our virtual live events. Be a guest on our podcast shows. Hire us or be hired for speaking engagements. Enhance hope, health, and healing in your lives. Creating global connections. The Connection Show, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. And joining me today is Steve Sapato. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks a lot. Sure appreciate being here.
Well, I'd love the audience, Steve, just to know a little bit about you. So I'm going to read your bio so they can kind of feel you out and know who you are.
Okay.
Steve Sapato has been a speaker and trainer for over 40 years as he shared business acumen and real-life motivational stories across America. Presenting over 1,000 times to audiences as large as 5,000, he trained businesses on how to be more successful with his management meetings and time management. His keynote presentation, Great Managers Are Not Born, has changed lives to build stronger and better companies, and his talks on change produces lasting habits. Steve loves to have fun on stage and with his audiences, and his engaging talks produce lasting impressions. Steve's audiences are consistently engaged, participate in activities, take notes, and leave with actionable steps to increase their self-worth and business success. Coming from a midwestern background, Steve offers down-to-earth conversations with his audiences that are not boring lectures. He even has an entire course dedicated to stop boring meetings. Whether your audience is 10 people or 2,000 in North America or abroad, Steve will deliver a tailor-made presentation of focus, achievement, laughter, and success. Well, great to meet you, Steve.
Thanks a lot. Sure appreciate it. That was a good bio. Now I got to live up to that hype, right?
Well, I love the fact that you bring laughter, because at the events that I've done with Dr. Laura Wood, we always balance the heaviness of life with improv comedy. So I love what you're doing.
Great, thanks. And that's really important that we let people know that it's okay to enjoy your life, even sometimes when you shouldn't.
Yeah, even when you're in the midst of pain and struggles, we all need some laughter and lightheartedness, don't we?
That's right. Oh, absolutely that, yeah. That was why when we were kids growing up, that was the cartoons, the Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner things and all that stuff. We had fun cartoons in those days.
Yeah, but now they're not politically correct.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's so strange, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness sakes.
We're afraid Elmer Fudd's going to teach our kids to shoot somebody. You're like, kid, not like the video games you're watching today. Gee.
Oh, my goodness sakes. Well, Steve, on the Connection Show, we like to do things a little bit different than other podcasts. So, and, people coming on the show a lot of times say, well, can you tell me what we're going to talk about? I go, no, I like spontaneity. So, sorry, I got a pop-up that just came up. I don't know why. I shut everything off on my computer. So anyway, so what we love to do is, I really believe in the Bible, Steve, Jesus, when he shared his ministry, he would share on stories, parables, and accounts. So I believe that everybody's life is a story, a parable, or account of who they are. So on the Connection Show, I love connecting dots from our childhood. And I love to connect those dots and bring them forward to who you've become today. So, with your permission, I'd love to ask you to be as vulnerable as you're willing to go, and to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of Steve Sapato's life and what it was like growing up in your family, and some of the fun and the hardships you went through to bring you to who you are today.
Yeah, that's a real good question on that. And I think I grew up in a little town, Carbon Cliff, Illinois. And I always say I had the perfect childhood. Well, it wasn't perfect. There's always something going on and things happening. But yeah, that was, I lived the life then outdoors. I think most kids in those days lived outdoors. And that's a big difference. You went and played. You woke up in the morning and you went out and played. And if you got back before the street lights came on, mom might not even let you back in yet. When the street lights came on, then you knew it was time to go home. So I grew up doing all what everybody else did, passing papers and selling seeds. We sold seeds door to door when we were 10 and 12 years old. But you move and you grow past that, and of course go into the service and get out of the service, and then get married right out of the service, right out of the military. So at 20 years old, you're married because that's what you did. Got married in those days, and it wasn't because you were crazy madly in love. It was because that's what you're supposed to do. Lasted 9-10 years, got out of that, went looking for another significant other. 3 years later, found what I thought was a gorgeous little Greek lady, and about 3 years into that relationship, a couple things happened that I think tripped her trigger, but long story short, it was a miserable next 17 years. We stayed married 21 total.
Well, that Greek woman probably had a temper too, because I was raised by a Greek mother, Paniata, and
yeah.
Oh man, and my husband will attest that when he makes me angry, I have that Greek in me, in me.
Look out! Ooh. That's right. Woo. Don't get on the wrong side of that. That's right.
the only two words I remember, Steve, hearing in our house a lot was yaya for grandma.
Yeah.
And skata, which means shit, because my grandpa would say, "You're full of skata, paniata."
Well, she could speak Greek, and her sister spoke Greek, and I said she had a son when I married her, and we had a son together, and I always said you should teach the boys how to speak Greek, and she just refused. I don't know why she didn't want the boys to learn Greek, but she never taught them. So I always tell people, out of 21 years of being around Greeks and people who spoke Greek, I learned how to say "periseto to vutro," which is pass the butter. So you can tell I'm a big fan of butter, right? And like you say, the skata word, and "klista ti porta," which means close the damn door, right?
Well, and it's funny, and then we'll divert back to the story, but I say, it's kind of funny with all of these political stuff going on in the country, and this, everybody's racist, and then people saying, "Oh, I'm not." I can get transparent with people and say I'm extremely prejudiced on one thing. My biggest prejudice, Steve, is people who come to the United States who refuse to speak English in public. And it's because of, and I know you can relate to this if you were married to a Greek woman, it's because growing up with Greek ancestry and going to the family gatherings with the Greek family members, my grandfather was from Greece. Whenever we'd gather for holidays, the Greeks would sit in one room, the American children in the other, and the Greeks would sit and talk in Greek and never would speak English. And so,
right.
Do you believe my grandfather died of Parkinson's in his 80s? And he called my sister, my brother, and I Pani's kids. He never knew our name. And so, when people are talking this political stuff and racism and stuff, I say I'm extremely racist or prejudiced, whatever word you want to use, on people who won't speak English because of my childhood trauma of never being able to know what my grandparents or anybody were talking about. But we'll divert back, because I'm I don't know what your family life was with this Greek woman, but did it drive you crazy if she spoke Greek and you didn't know what she was talking about?
Oh, absolutely. I remember we were shortly married, and we went to a big Greek wedding in Chicago.
Yeah.
And literally, she took me into the house, like whoever's house we were going to be staying at. And I'm not big on staying with relatives that I know, much less relatives that I don't know. So we'd go up and stay in. And I remember sitting down in this house where, like you say, there's 25 people in this house, just packed into this house, all getting ready for the next day's wedding. Mm-hmm. And they're all speaking Greek.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they spoke. And I plopped down on the sofa, just kind of trying to, and I'm fairly outgoing. I can make my way, except I know nothing. So I'm sitting there, and they for 2 hours, 3 hours, they spoke Greek. And I remember somebody came to me and said, "Hey, you want the TV on?" You know, they could speak English.
Oh yeah.
They just didn't. And
Yeah.
he said, "You want the TV on?" I go, "Yeah, that TV'd be great." I'll be damned if they didn't have a Greek TV channel. And that's what they turned on. And I'm just sitting there going, somebody knew that they were pulling my chain real hard. And
Well,
my wife,
we probably were at the same family gatherings because I'm from Chicago. My mom, went to Amundsen High School, and then she went to Greek school, and my grandfather owned a Greek restaurant in Chicago. So, so
I love
anyway,
Greek food. I love Greek
yeah.
food, man. And you could feed me Greek food 7 days a week. I'm still happy as a clam. It's like Greek patatas, right? Sulaikia. The Cyanike, the flaming Greek cheese, is just fabulous.
And
You're
their
like, oh,
lamb,
man.
their lamb is great. Greek lamb. But anyway, so let's divert. You were married to this Greek woman, and of course, she probably drove you crazy because Greek women do. Yeah, I'm an exception. I say that I'm a Greek goddess because I have blonde hair and green eyes, so I'm a Greek goddess.
There you go. There you go. But yeah, so I mean, you can go on and on about the life like that, but I look back and some of the things, like you say, the things that you don't realize. I was in my 50s and still telling somebody that I'm not good with my hands. I can't work with my hands. And when somebody said, "Well, didn't you do this? Did you do this?" Because I've owned different businesses. I owned a sporting goods shop where we did all of our own work on snow skis and bindings and golf clubs. We built our own we did all that stuff. And when I was running the nightclub, we re-roofed the place. We put new floors down. So when I said to somebody, "I'm not good with my hands," they went, "Well, didn't you do all of that stuff?" And I went, "Well, yeah." And they went, "Well, then you're pretty good with your hands." And I went, I guess now that you talk about it, I guess yeah. And then we started to wonder why. Well, way back when I was probably 6 or 8 years old, my dad, who worked at John Deere in the factory, and this is, again, one of the things you think. My mom was the business person who owned a business, for half my life. And my dad always, quote unquote, always worked in the shop. But when you look back and see what actually happened, my dad tried many times to get out of the shop. He went to work as a butcher, learned how to be a butcher. He learned how to be a hairstylist. He learned how to do this. He tried all kinds of different things, which is the entrepreneurial spirit that my mother didn't have. So I always thought, I got my business stuff, my entrepreneurial stuff from my mom and running a business, but it was from my dad's side. And what my dad was doing at one point in time, like I said, I was about 6 or 8, and he was running a radio repair shop, TV and radio repair place, out of the house, out of the basement.
Wow.
And I'd go try and help him. And those were the days of the knob and tube, so you could pull stuff out. And I wanted to help. And I remember him saying to me, "You need to just get out of here and stop being in the way, because you're just going to mess things up." And in my head, that came back with, you can't do anything. And so internally, I made that into, well, you're not good with your hands and your dad doesn't want you around. So do your things. And that stayed with me for 50 years, right? 45 years, that you're not good. And it's funny how when we think about those things, we don't really understand how much those things change our lives and hinder our growth, so to speak. Now, it didn't hurt me because I went on to become a speaker, presenter, and being good with your hands isn't required there. But it is all along the way, the things that held. I remember I was in my 40s and I was in high school theater, and I played in a band when I was in high school. I played in a rock and roll band. And when I was in my 40s, my sister said something. We're with my mom and dad, and my sister said something, and my mom and dad said something. I said, "Well, you guys never came to any of my stuff anyway."
Aww.
And they were like, "Yeah, see, and they were like, "What are you talking about? We went to everything." I went, "You did not. You were never at anything I ever did." And they went, "We saw absolutely everything you ever did." And then they gave me some examples, and I went. So they had come to one of my theater productions where I had the lead and was singing and doing all this stuff, and they said, "Yeah, we saw when this happened. We saw when." I went, "So you were there?" And they went, "Yeah." Now again, this is 25 years later.
But
And I said,
your burden was so heavy about not being good enough that you didn't think that they came, and so you
yeah,
just even like almost disassociated that they were even present.
yeah. Well, and as far as I knew, they weren't, because here's what they said. I said, well, why didn't you come backstage and say something? And they went, we didn't want to bother you with your friends. So they came, sat in their seats, watched it, and went home. And for me, again, my mom and dad didn't care enough to even come at any of my stuff.
And when you got home, they never said, "Hey, Steve, we saw it. The production was great." They didn't even comment on it.
Nope. But see, but that's one of those where we take that burden. They weren't responsible for what I felt, but I felt that. And I'm sure it hindered a lot of the things that I thought of myself as I went along. But those are the funny things that when you say, what's your life like when you grow up? And I go, how many people here have ever done something where their mom and dads didn't seem like they were appreciative or didn't seem like they were paying attention to? And so we do things and we become someone based upon our need to fill that spot. Matter of fact, you said something earlier, Jill, about filling that hole. And that's what so many of us spend our times trying to do, is fill that hole, right? And matter of fact, when you were saying you were doing events, I'm putting together an event for February of 2022 called Achieve, which is all about finding yourself and growing into the person who's going to achieve your dreams. And you had a tagline, which was hope, health, and healings, victories in your life. And that's that's the perfect thought process for what I'm going to be putting on in February, which is all about how do you achieve if you can't get past what's holding you back. And that's really, those are the things that we all have to learn, isn't it? We all have to learn how to grow, how to become the person that we really want to be. And
Well, sometimes I think it takes being able, and so many people are starting to do this now, Steve, is having that mentor or that coach that you respect who can maybe sometimes hold your hand and walk you through that victimhood so that you can get to a place of achievement and victory. And when all of us, there's not a person out there that couldn't identify with something you've said today. I believe our stories, Steve, when we look for similarities in someone's story instead of differences, that's when we can truly get to an essence of healing ourselves, because each person's story is so powerful when we look for the similarity. So hearing Steve today sharing his story of feeling like he was not good enough and to get away, and that taking up space was too much for his father at that time, and with him looking at that victim of not being good enough and then moving from not good enough to feeling like he is good enough is victory. And so when you hear a story, Steve, of someone sharing and see the similarities, connect it with your own lives, because that's where your healing's going to begin. You're going to begin through the stories of each other if you're not yet ready to share your story.
That's when you were saying something that triggered something, which is we worry a lot about who hasn't supported us, who hasn't helped us, and how we can relate it to others. But ask yourself this: who are you holding back today? Who are you not saying the right words to today? I'll give you an example. My dad, when I was real young, played the harmonica, and people don't remember there was a group out called the Harmonicats, but about 5 guys who played harmonicas and had a great time playing harmonicas on stage. My dad always said he was a great singer, and when he was younger could sing, and he would sing off to himself once in a while. And he could play different instruments like the organ and the piano. And as we got older, my dad never did any of that stuff. So I almost forgot about it until he passed away in a nursing home a few years ago. And when we went to pick up his final stuff out of the nursing home, the staff, like 3 of the staff, came out just to say bye to us. And we were like, oh, that's pretty nice. And they went, we're really going to miss RC. I went, beg your pardon? And they went, we're going to miss him. I went, you are, huh? And they went, well, everybody loved when he would sing or play the harmonica. Now, I hadn't heard my dad sing in 20 years, and I hadn't heard him play the harmonica in 30 or 40 years. And at the nursing home, he was doing those things. So the question I had to ask myself was, so why did he not do them at home? And it must have been something that my mom, his wife, and I relate it back to my second marriage, which was when I would go into my basement to practice my guitar. Remember, I told you I was in a band when I was young? And I said, I'd like to get that skill back. So probably when I was in my 40s, I went to the basement to practice my guitar. My wife would come down the steps and yell at me and say, you have nothing else to do but practice that damn guitar. Shouldn't you be doing? And then she'd tell me, here's your duties. And so you stop playing. And I got 3 guitars that sit in the corner now and haven't been played in, 15, 20 years.
But you're going to start this week.
Probably not. But we all do that to each other. We do it to our kids. We do it to our significant others. We might do it to the people at our work, which is just say something that instead of lifting them up, holds them back. So what are you saying today? What are you doing today that might be holding someone else back? And how can you stop yourself from doing that? That's really vital, especially in today's world.
Well, one of the things that can be done, Steve, and then I want to move back to your story from the Greek way, but one of the things that can be done, Steve, is a thing called legacy burden work. And how legacy burden work works is you take a burden in your life. So this burden of, can't you be doing something else? Let's take that burden that your ex-wife said to you. And then you hand that burden back to your father of can't you be doing something else? And then you take the burden from your father back to your grandfather. Can't you be doing something else? And then your great-great-grandfather. So you bring it back 4 generations, and in the Bible it calls it 4 generations of sin. But in burden work, you take the burden back 4 generations. And then from the 4 generations of bringing it back, then you bring forward the blessing of oh, that's pure joy hearing your music, great-grandfather. Oh, that's pure joy, Dad. And oh, is that pure joy? And bless yourself. You bring the blessing back. So you bring the burden back first, release it, and then you bring the blessing in. But then the beautiful part is you could even take it 1 generation further. If you have sons or daughters, you can take the burden that maybe you unknowingly passed on to your children and bring that back, starting with them of, can't you be doing something else, John, and then bringing it to yourself. And then you bring the blessing to your children. Oh, your music is pure joy.
What a great idea. What a great idea. And we can do that with our significant others. If you tell them there's something that, like, my wife likes to sing, and I think she actually loves to sing, but she's so holding back. She doesn't sing around any of her relatives, so I don't know what would happen there. But if I encourage her, she'll at least sing a little bit in front of me, and maybe I need to do more encouraging of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the first place is you find the one word or burden, and you take the burden first. So like your burden, which was not being good enough, that your dad said when he was building things and stuff, doing the radio, you take that one burden. So if you have children, you take the burden that maybe you passed on to your kids of, you're not good enough at this, and you bring that to yourself, and it says, Steve, you're not good enough, and you bring it to your dad, you're not good enough, and you bring all that back. And then you bring the blessing in. So you can take it one by one with any burden. The one that people listening, the biggest one I think everyone should do is busyness. And I'm one to say this because I get stuck in this many times. Is you take a burden with your children of busyness, and then you bring it back to you of busyness, and then your dad, you bring it all the way back, and then you bring in space for connection. Let's bring in because what would it be like if we blessed each other with space for connection instead of always being in a whirlwind of busyness?
Yep. Think about that. And that is even attributable to things like your cell phone. Mm-hmm. Are you, I heard somebody the other day, and it's true. And now I live by it, which is if you leave your cell phone at a table, at a conversation you're having, if I leave my cell phone face up, I always want to look at it. Like when somebody buzzes in or something, and you've taken away from the immediacy of the person who you're with. You've belittled them a little bit. I don't know that they would go, oh, I feel slighted. They won't say that. But you've taken a little bit away from them by looking at your phone to see what's important, what's more important than you. That's really significant. So always take your cell phone and put it face down if you're going to leave it on the, like if there's an emergency. I tell people all the time, because people go, well, what if my kids call, or what if this? I went, when I was growing up, we didn't have cell phones, right? You left in the morning and you didn't talk to somebody until you got home at night if you could pick up the phone, right? So, and that should be true all the way, which is I don't get to talk to my kids every 20, 30 minutes. I don't get to let them text me every 20, 30 minutes. What's significant in your life? What can you do to make it even seem more valuable? So if you say, boy, but could be my kids, well, what's going to happen, right? Did they spill their chocolate milk at home? Leave it alone.
Yep.
Right? And make the person sitting right here with you feel important. Let's face it, if I'm on this call right now and I'm constantly looking over here going, hey, what's my phone say? What's my phone say? That's silly. We shut them off during these things so that they don't distract us. We should do that for everybody we care about.
Even appointments, Steve. I had a therapist I was going to for years in Chicago, and I was predominantly 5 to 10 minutes late for every session.
Oh,
and
wow.
After about the 5th time, she looked at me and says, Jill, do you know I have a waiting list of over 100 people? And she said, if you want to have therapy with me, I expect you to be here at least 3 to 5 minutes early so that we start your sessions on time. And if you're not willing to do that, I need to discharge you as a client. And do you know I was never late again? And this is what she said. You're telling me that my professional therapy is not that important to you, even though you're coming every week. And so we do that to each other too with appointments. How many of us show up late on an appointment and say, "Oh, I got stuck on another Zoom, or I got stuck"? Well, then you shouldn't have made an appointment with me, because when we are really trying to honor each other's time and say that they're important to us, then we should give them that space.
Absolutely right. I'm still a nutball on family dinners. I don't know how many other people are that, but now it's just Kristen and I. We're going to sit down as a family, and that's the way it'll work. You don't get to say, "Oh, I'm going to eat in the living room." I've been around people who, when they go to eat dinner, the kids go eat in the living room around the TV, and the mom and dad are sitting in the kitchen. No, this is valuable family time. I love the TV show Blue Bloods, because here they are, full adults, all still sitting around dad's table on Sunday, all enjoying a family meal because they talk about things that are valuable to the family.
So take us, Steve. I agree 100%. Plus, it sets you up for eating disorders by doing that, because you disconnect. You disconnect from the meal, and you don't even mindfully know what you just ate if you're sitting around the TV. So there's a whole nother topic on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can go down that rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. So take us to the Greek ex-wife, and then what took place after the Greek ex-wife.
Well, it's, obviously the screaming and shouting. And I think what's interesting when I share that is I fell into the screaming and shouting. Now, I wrote a book called The 20. Now, I don't do relationship work anymore, but I did for a while. But I wrote a book called The 20 things you need to learn in order to find the love of your life. It's not how to find the love of your life, but how to learn to find the love of your life. And the reason I wrote that was because most of us think that we fall in love with our heart, and we can make a lifetime last with just the love that we share for somebody. And love without friendship, I call it friendship on fire. But love without friendship won't be a long lasting. It might be a couple of years, a few years, but it'll never be forever, because the friendship is probably the most important part. And we overlook so many things. So when I interviewed all these people for my book, some of the things were what we overlook in people because we think we're in love. And like you had mentioned earlier, the Greek temper. And before we ever got married, that Greek temper came up many times, and I just looked over it. It was no big deal. Well, it turned out to be part of a big deal, because not only was she mad, but then she got me into it, and I fell right into it. And so we were screaming mad at each other for 17 years and made things nuts. When I finally walked away, I said, it's time to end this whole thing because it's just too crazy. And I went out on my own. I really learned the importance of being able to take care of yourself, because the one thing that the Greek family, as you know, is a close-knit family. So I had gotten close to the uncles, I had gotten close to the other people, and it felt good. You sat down, you ate the wonderful meals that you go up to the Chicago and be at these big events, and then suddenly you find yourself totally alone. So I went from that relationship, that I fought hard. I thought it was hard because I wanted my son to be safe so he wouldn't be in harm's way when he grew up. And what I found was it was probably just as much me not wanting to leave that atmosphere of family, because when I cut the ties, everything's gone. And I was now by myself, and my family consisted of my mom and my dad. And so it was really quite an abrupt ending. And so I spent 3 years just dealing with my own loneliness and my ability to find happiness in Steve. Like you say, she mentioned codependency earlier when I think we weren't online yet. I don't think we were in this. But my dependency was on my partner because they gave me family. And then when you don't have that, suddenly I didn't have a codependency. And I took 3 years. The first year was tough. The first 6 months I cried a lot, and it wasn't because I missed my wife. It was because I was alone and I hadn't dealt with Steve in a one-on-one basis.
Well, and you know what, Steve, I'm so grateful that you shared that, because I've done a lot. I did a group with Dan Allender. He's a Christian psychologist who owns Seattle School of Theology in Seattle, and he does trauma workshops. And from what you said, and then we'll take back into that, he said that we need to look at the traumas in our life. And many times people, I didn't have trauma in my life. Like, I grew up in a nice family, blah, blah, blah. But what Dan says is we've all had traumas in our life. Some of them are small T traumas and some are large T traumas. And this is what he said. He said, for example, you go through a divorce and that might be a large T trauma. But what about the small T trauma that it's your first Christmas alone without your spouse, and you're sitting there all alone without that family connection, and that's a small T. And he said it's so imperative that we take the story and write in about 1,000 words, and learn how to write about that T, that small T or big T, and we learn how to write with landing the plane. Come out of the helicopter and descriptively talk about that trauma. So going back to you now, Steve. So you're alone for your first Christmas or your first whatever. And so you land the plane and descriptively share, the fire was crackling. There was music on in the background as I sat there with tears dripping down my face, realizing for the first time I was alone. And so you go into that story with such connection that it brings healing to your soul.
Well, that's what you have to learn to do. You have to learn to evolve. We had a son, and he was 17, might have been 18 by that time, that first Christmas, if you talk about Christmas. And again, it's like, okay, well, that's all right. It'll be Zach and I at this Christmas. We'll be fine. And we do all the right things, and we make everything happen, and then it's time for him to leave and go to his mother's, right? He didn't want to go. I certainly didn't want him to go, but it was the right thing to do. And so then you pack him up and send him off. And again, you're all alone. Here you're used to being family. And there were 4 of us in that other family, plus the extended family. And suddenly, even though the son is gone, and you just sit there alone, and you have to learn how to deal with yourself. That's so vital. The importance of that. I think a lot of people try and deny that it happened. Hey, it's no big deal. Or that's why they end up at the bar down the street, because they don't want to be alone. So all of those things play a huge part in your survival. And then you have to learn how to not just survive, but how to prosper from that. And that's what it takes. You got to learn the prospering part of being alone. A lot of people say, well, you have to fall in love with yourself again. And I go, well, maybe that's part of what you do. There was a lot for Steve Sapato to like about Steve Sapato. But there was also a lot that you didn't like about yourself. And when you really start to do self-evaluation, you find sometimes the dislike overpowers the like, which it should never do. And that's vital that you, again, keep those things in your head so that you understand that I could talk negative about myself all day long, but that's not what we're supposed to do. And so we have to learn how to lift ourselves. What like people say, grab yourself by the bootstraps, pull yourself up there, Sapato. And you go, yeah, that's what it is. And that's what it's all about, isn't it, Jill? We have to learn how to take care of ourselves, learn the right phrases to use on ourselves. I tell people when I do some of my workshops and stuff, hey, when you get up in the morning, how many people love getting up in the morning? You wake up, you're like, ooh, this is a great morning. And about half the audience will say, yeah. And the other half is like, no. And I go, how many people here, either your spouse or yourself, would like to get up and be in a good mood, that morning? And then most of the hands go up. And I go, you can make that happen. And I go, here's the easiest way I've ever found to make yourself happy if you don't wake up in a great mood. Go in the bathroom, close the door, turn on the light, look in the mirror, and say, wow, you're the best looking person in the room.
Yep.
And it's true, right? It's true.
Yeah, change your attitude. So tell us then about, after this period of mourning and grief and loneliness and 3 years of sadness and agony, what took place next?
Well, I think that's just a matter of growth, because I was already moving on by then. I'd lived my whole life in the Quad Cities area, and it was just, time for me to check the whole thing and move on. So I put my resume out and got hired to a new place, picked up and moved on. And it was meeting the right people. Of course, I'm always reading the right books, right? You have to do that. So if you're reading not novels, don't read the crime novels and that kind of stuff. Read the right books that teach you how you should be a better person. I'm a big fan of Jim Rohn. I'm a big fan of Charlie Tremendous Jones, Zig Ziglar. Everybody here now says, Tony Robbins, and that's great. You can, whoever you want to pick, read their books, and they will help you to grow and become the person. So that's what I did. I was already speaking. I hadn't quit speaking through that whole time. So I was training companies on how to, great managers are made, not born, is one of my talks. So I would go into these companies and talk about how they can be better managers. And of course, meeting more people, meeting the right people, and starting a whole life new and over, and finding out what makes you happy. And of course, a few years down the road, I met my wife and fell in love. The difference was that when we fell in love this time, we were great friends. We ended up working together for about 3 months, getting to know each other. But we found that working 8 hours a day together, we didn't have any challenges, no problems at all. We could spend all that time together and still get along. And then we fell in love. And what we found, because she ended up traveling with me for about a year on the road, and then I ended up traveling with her to California. But what we found was real simple, which was, if we were friends and then we fell in love, the relationship really worked. It still works. We're 6 years into our marriage now, and everything we do is, are you going to come along, right? Think about it. When you're with your friends, when you were growing up, especially when you had really close friends, and like for me, I'll say, you go to the ball diamond. You called up a friend. You said, hey, I'm going to go to the ball diamond. You want to go? They were like, yeah, we're going. Hey, I'm going to go to the store. You want to go? If you called somebody up, or if you're sitting at their house and you said, hey, I'm going to go to the grocery store. You want to go? They all went yes. Every time. Nobody said, you go without me, bring me back something good. And that's what my wife and I have found out here, that when she says, hey, I have to run to the store, or Steve, we need these groceries. Would you run to the store? I go, absolutely. And then before I can get in the car, she's getting in the other side, because she's not saying, you go to the store. She's saying, we need to get this. And I'm just alerting you, Steve, that you need to drive. Mm-hmm. And we do everything together. And I mean everything. She's out of town right now visiting her family in Joplin, Missouri. And wow. Last night we watched, what's the name of I want to say Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah.
So she downloaded it on her tablet, and then we found it on my TV here, and we sat for an hour and watched TV together, even though she's in a different place, because we're great friends and we love sharing almost everything. And
That's
that's so
great.
vital to your success.
That's amazing. So then take us, that's just and I kind of have a similar with my husband. We dated 7 years as great friends.
Oh,
And
wow.
and then he finally popped the question. I almost fell over. I go, you want to marry me? So we've been together 27, we've been married 20 years,
Wow.
but dated 7, so
Wow, that's
27
great.
years. Yeah. And now when I do my events, he does all the books because he's great at Quicken,
Oh,
and he's the phenomenal concierge driver. So we do an event, and everybody that comes to our events love him because he picks them up at the airport and takes them
so
everywhere.
we need to team up on
Oh yeah.
my February event so
Oh
that we
yeah.
can put this together.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, or more, and once everybody's over this insanity, I've got amazing locations in Aruba and the Dominican we can go to, Steve.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
And I've got a phenomenal place in Branson that you and your wife would love to do an event at. Love, love,
Oh,
love. So,
that'd be cool.
anyway, so now take us. You meet the woman that you're best friends with and in love with, and then tell us about your company in closing so that people know. Before you do, I want to show your bio real quick so people can see your bio. So, this is Steve's bio that I read out loud, and on it, it has his website, how to get a hold of him. Steve, Steve A. Steve A. Steve Sapato. Here we go. Steve Sapato, seminars.com. So you can reach out, and this will be on the YouTube channel too, and the link. So talk to us because we want people to know how to reach out to you so they can too grow into phenomenal speakers and come to your events.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, I've been speaking. Matter of fact, I taught 7 years of college speech way back when. And I love helping people to become better presenters because being a better presenter changes your life. It makes you more confident, it makes you more visible. It puts you in a place so that people start to know you and notice you. And that's what it takes to succeed. So, 20 years ago, I really started to push that I can help you be a better speaker and better presenter. And then just a few years ago, you guys have all heard of TEDx type meetings. Well, a lot of my friends who were speakers couldn't get on that. And in order to get hired as speakers, you also need a speaker reel, which is something we include. We send, like when we apply for a job, we say, and here's what I can do on stage. And you got like 2 or 3 minutes worth of you in different things showing how good you can be on stage. Well, when you can't get on stage and get recorded, that's tough. So when none of my friends could get into on TEDx, I started this thing called Speaker Talks down here in Tampa. And every 6 months, I put 15 people. I give them 8 weeks worth of speaker training. I put them on stage to talk on their best topic for 15 minutes so that they can get a professionally recorded video in front of a live audience. And that's what I do. So I help people become excellent speakers. And I've been working more recently with CEOs because most people don't really understand how valuable it is to be a great presenter. So if one of the company leaders is going to be presenting in front of their board, it's important that you have the continuity, the pace, the timing of your presentation so that you really impact the most people to get your point across. So if you're trying to accomplish something, it happens. And so that most people don't understand that's true on everyday things, whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, being able to present your stuff. And that's why I started Steve Sapato Seminars. And that's why I also have speakertalks.com. And both those businesses are designed to help you become a better speaker. Let me ask the question of anybody here ever seen a boring speaker? Seen boring speakers?
Horrible. And now more than ever, because I can't tell you how many Zoom events I've been to that after 20 minutes I'm like, I can't handle hearing one more talk
That's
on
right.
marketing. Like I don't want to hear one more talk on marketing. I'm like, so
Well,
they're all the same and boring.
but that's just it. They're boring. Now, people tell me, you don't understand, Steve. I have boring material. I go, no, you have dry material. You make it boring. And that's so vital that I got a website out there. If you go look, I think it's called Stop Boring Meetings and Stop Boring Speakers, right? And I've got those out there because one of the things that people tell me is, Steve, you don't understand. I've been speaking for 10 years. I go, yeah, but are you any good? And they always go, well, yeah. Okay. And so that's why I ask you, have you ever seen a boring speaker? And everybody raised their hand. I go, when that speaker was done speaking, did you walk up to them afterwards and say, you're really boring? No, of course not. Did you tell them, you probably could use some work on your, no. Did you say you suck? No, you didn't say any of those things. You said, hey, good job. Hey, great job. Hey, nicely done.
So they kept going on with their boring talks.
There you go. And imagine if you said that to them, is everybody saying that to you? So you always have to ask yourself, what training have you done? Matter of fact, Warren Buffett in 2017 was doing a commencement address, and he said, everybody can increase their personal worth, their personal value to their company by 50% simply by taking a public speaking course. Phenomenal that Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, would say that you need to take a public speaking course, and yet almost no one does.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I did take public speaking 1 and 2 at a junior college, and I'm going to share this with you candidly. When I first took it, I wanted to throw up when it was my turn to talk. But this is something that was really profound. I sold technology for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And two of the things that I'll never forget, Steve, is one was with Icon Office Solution, which is one of the biggest technology companies in the United States with copiers. And they went around the country, the executives, vice presidents of marketing, technology. There was a team of about 8 executives that flew around the country to each office. And each sales rep had to do a 20-minute presentation on technology and IT and document management solutions. So I remember doing mine in front of these executives. When I finished, all the executives said to me, "You are one of the best salespeople we've ever seen in the country. That was phenomenal." And I looked at him and said, "It was that bad, wasn't it?" And they said, "What?" And I said, "It was bad." And they go, "No, it was phenomenal." And I said, "Well, I wanted to throw up, and I felt like I was going to pass out, because I said, I cannot stand speaking standing up." And they looked at me and said, "Well, why didn't you sit down and do your presentation?" I said, "I could have." And they said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "Well, if I'm grounded sitting down, I can talk. But when I have to stand up, I feel like I'm going to pass out." So that was one. The second one was with Konica Minolta. Again, it was a boot camp training. We all had to be videoed on doing, how to qualify, how to close, all of that. Again, the whole team of trainers told me it was one of the best presentations they ever saw. And I thought it was horrible. So I still carry, Steve, this burden that I'm a horrible speaker. And I'm petrified to speak on stage. I'm petrified. Still. And I've done all that training, and I'm still scared to death to talk on stage.
Can I give you a piece of advice?
Yeah.
How often do you record yourself and watch it back?
I don't. And actually, the last event that I spoke at my own event, I spoke at, and I did have to sit down. I couldn't stand, but I do have to tell you, I had plantar fasciitis, so I had to sit. And we did record it, and I have the recording, which I'd love to send to you.
I have the recording.
You do?
See, now, okay, I'm going to interrupt you. No,
Yeah.
You said I have the recording. When I taught college, and I taught college for 2 years, and I couldn't figure out how none of my students were getting that much better. Okay? Real simple. No one teaches you how to teach college. You know that? If you've got a master's degree, they say, go teach. And they don't really give a rip if you are good or not. You got a master's degree, go teach junior college. Okay? And for 2 years, I couldn't, and this is a burden on me, which was I couldn't figure out why my students weren't, so if they had a tick, if they kept going, you'd say, quit doing that. And they'd go, okay. And then next time they spoke, they did that. And you're like, quit doing that. And we had them do 5 or 7 speeches, and they always ended up still doing that tick, whatever that tick might have been. And then, and I'm not sure why, but something went click. Now, maybe something I read, a book I read, a project I was working on, but it said, hey, this is what you need to do. And it was called First Brain, Second Brain. And the first brain protects us from all of the bad things that people say as best as it can. So if I'm saying stop this, right, the first brain says, it's not that bad, don't worry about it. Once the third year I was teaching out of 7, I recorded the students, right? Now, I set the camera up, so we got real comfortable before the whole thing happened. But basically, the first time they got up to introduce themselves, they got recorded. When they got up the next time that we met in class, they got up to introduce their friend. They got every time they spoke, they got recorded. And they had to go back and watch the recording and report on it, on what they could do, what they did really well, and what they could improve upon. Not what did I do bad, not what did you do really well, and what can you improve on? And every single time, Jill, that tick, that nervousness, that went away every single time. So what I teach people in order to get over their stage fright, quote unquote, is you have to record yourself on everything and watch it back immediately. So if I record myself on stage, I got to, within a week, I have to watch it back to see what I did right and what I can. And I still do this. I've been speaking for 40 years, and what could you have done better there, Steve? How many more questions could you have asked the audience to get them more involved? What could you have done to help them participate more? That will absolutely change your life. For the people who are listening, if they have a stage fright, record yourself. I ask people all the time, Joe, when they say, I've been speaking when's the last time you recorded yourself and watched it back? And I don't care how many people they're out there going, well, I don't ever record myself, or I never watch it back.
Well, that is a phenomenal tip, and I'm going to take you on that, because I still remember one of my very first sales managers years ago, before we did the recording, and every single sales call I ever went on with him, every call, the minute we'd get in the car, I'd say, his name was Jack, believe it or not, Jack and Jill, and I'd say, Jack, tell me what you felt I did well in the presentation, and where do I need improvement. And he used to call me his ace maverick #1 sales rep, because I always wanted to know where my strengths and weaknesses were all the time. And I'm one of those kinds of people that really know me say that I take criticism better than anyone they know, because I'm like, yeah, help me, correct me. So that I know. And then the other story I have with you is in San Diego. When I lived in San Diego, I lived with one of the #1 rock and roll disc jockeys in San Diego.
Oh, wow.
And every single night, and then she went on to become an anchor woman on the network news. And every single night when she'd come home from work, she'd always bring her recordings home, and she'd sit and she'd listen to all of her recordings of her on-air personalities for the day. And I'd listen with her, and she'd always fine-tooth her. So she was one of the best DJs I've ever seen.
And some people think when you do that you're being egotistical. You just want to hear yourself talk, and you're like, that's not what we do it for.
No. So I'm going to take your advice, and when we get off, I'm going to listen, because at my conference, it was fully recorded, and I have not yet listened to my own talk. And what's even worse than that, Steve, you're going to crack up when I tell you this. I was in an anthology book in February, my first published anthology book that was a #1 international bestseller called Fiercely Faithful. And do you believe I have yet to read my own chapter?
Oh, no kidding. But you think how many times you read it though earlier when you put it together.
You're going to crack up laughing. I think I only read it like twice and then submitted it.
Oh, wow.
So it's so bad. I know. So that will be my challenge. What you helped me with a challenge. I have to read my own. And I think it's still that burden of, like you said, your burden of that not good enough or whatever it is. And I'm afraid to even look at it.
That's what it is. We're afraid. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Many times we're controlled by fear. And once you learn to get past that, it changes who you are.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Well, tell us about your closing. Tell us about your event so that we can get on the bandwagon in February. What is the event? Where will it be? Or are you just working on it yet and don't have details?
Every 6 months, I put a new speaker talks out there. So let me ask the question. How many people here would love to be a professional speaker? And be able to get paid to speak. And if that's you, then you probably need to reach out, because Speaker Talks is always looking for 15 speakers who I will work with for 8 weeks, teach you how to be a better speaker and presenter than you are right now. I use a signature course called Storytizing, because I always tell people, when you're a parent or a grandparent and you want to put the kids to bed, what do? You tell them stories. We don't want to put our people to sleep. We want to wake them up. So I say storytizing is how I will teach you to engage your audience, where you use your stories, but you tell it using their memories, their emotions, and their experiences.
So is this only for 15 people or 15 people and then you bring an audience in?
Audience in, yeah. 15 people who get to speak, but a full audience to come watch. And I have people from all walks of life, business owners, professional speakers, authors. So anybody who has a message to share that they think will change people's lives. So that's what I do. Every 6 months, I put it on down here in Tampa. Different venues every time, because I'm looking for the perfect venue, and I haven't found it yet. And so we haven't picked out our February event venue yet. But just so you know, it's always professionally recorded, professionally staged. You get all the wonderful things happening.
So
that's what my event's about.
So let's go a little deeper on that, if you don't mind. So, so if a person is one of these 15 that you select, how much does it cost, if you wouldn't mind, to be?
Yeah.
What is
it's
it?
Only $25. Yeah, it's only $2,500 to get 8 weeks worth of speaker training from me.
Okay.
And get on stage, and get professionally recorded, so that you can make that sizzle reel, or you could share that. It's 15 minutes where you could share that around the world if you wanted to.
And can you
show people that you're a good speaker?
Can they make payments, or is it a flat? Is there a payment plan or anything like that? Okay.
Yep, there's a payment plan. I'm very flexible because here's what I know. I've been broke. I've been broke in my life and said, boy, I just need somebody to help me out. And once in a while, you get those people to help you out. Most of the time, the people, I was down in Florida 10, 11 years ago, and somebody who was fairly new, they'd only been on the speaking thing for about 3 years, from what they said from stage. But they were making themselves a fortune, and today they're millionaires. But what I will share with you is that when it came time to buy their program, which they'd only been in business 3 years, and they were charging $10,000 for their speaker or their coaching. You want to be a coach? $10,000 for me to teach you how to be a coach. And I watched this person absolutely hammer this person who wanted to be a coach. And they said, I don't know how. They said, well, borrow the money, rent, mortgage your house, get more credit cards, do that. It's like, no, we've all been down. Don't go into debt for this, right? Mm-hmm. It's only $2,500, so it's not life-changing like $10,000 might be. But yeah, I will do whatever it takes to help you if money's what's holding you back. Most of the time, it's not money. Yep. Most of the time, it's a decision of whether they want to be and move forward.
Well, it's an investment too in your business. So the other question, if you wouldn't mind, and then I know we got to end here, is so if they sign up for this, and you only take 15, so you guys get on the website immediately when you hear this and sign up, because there's only 15 slots. So approximately, Steve, and I know we're in a weird time and age right now. Approximately how many attendees attend the event that will hear the speaker speak? Do you have even a clue on that with COVID right now? And
oh yeah. Matter of fact, we just had our last one in June, and we had 60 people present.
Okay.
The one during COVID, we ended up, because like you said, we had events canceled. So in case people don't know it, if you put a $10,000 deposit down on a hotel, the hotel doesn't give you your money back if COVID says you can't have the event. They don't.
Unless you hire Jill Reynolds, because Jill Reynolds knows how to get that money back. So if you hire me, and Steve, we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah.
I literally was able, and I'm not lying to you, to get a hotel in Virginia to go to contract with a woman in Africa for an event, and convince the hotel to go to contract with a 100% refundable clause in it up to 12 hours before the event started.
Wow.
Yeah, so we'll talk later about that.
Yeah.
And I got
because that's what it was.
And I did my event, believe it or not, in Branson, Missouri, with no contract at a theater. Nice. With no contract, and I could have canceled up to the night before with no contract. So
pretty cool.
Yeah. So we'll talk offline on that. So talk to me about how the difference is work with an event planner that knows how to negotiate.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, I have to admit, I don't have experience in the negotiation or, event planning. So mine was always just, I said, hey, I need a place to have it. And I went out and rented it. And then I rented the next one. And like I said, so even during COVID, we had one scheduled for March. It got canceled. When I learned I wasn't going to get my money back, I said, well, we still got to put it on because my speakers still wanted to speak. They contracted to get on a stage and speak. So even during the COVID thing, we did it 3 months later in June, and we still had 40 people attend in the audience, which
Great.
Still gave them, so people could hear them laugh when they were on their, on stage. They could hear them laugh, they could hear them interact and clap. And that's vital to your success as a speaker, is to have a valid sizzle reel that really works.
Yeah. Well, everyone, please go on Steve's website today and reach out to him. He's amazing. And let's do this, Steve. Let's do this. Do we want to do a promo? Do you want to put in Heard It on Braveheart Workshops with, I don't know, some kind of throw... You create something yourself if you want to throw something in as sign up within the next, say, 30 days, because we're November and we're going into Thanksgiving. So sign up between now and, say, December 15th, and Steve will put something together and throw in a bonus for you. Maybe his books or something.
I'll tell you what I will do, and that is when we do this, I can either give you a discount on how much it's going to cost you to be at the event, or we will give you an equivalent. So let's do, if you tell them you heard it on Braveheart,
Workshops.
Let's take it from $2,500 down to $2,000. That's $500 right off the top.
Wow.
Just for saying you heard it.
On Braveheart Workshops. Okay, so you guys, you've got only 30 days from November 15th, today is November 15th, to December 15th. To sign up with Steve's phenomenal training with a $500 discount by saying you heard it on Braveheart Workshops. So, Steve, you're an amazing man. I can't wait to meet you and your wife. And I know we have some great things we can do together, Steve. I'm really excited to know you.
Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure being on the show, and I look forward to working with you. That'll be great.
Awesome. Everyone, thanks for joining us, and join in with hope, health, and healing in your lives, moving from victim to victory on The Connection Show. Have a blessed day, Steve.
Thank you. God bless.
You too. Thanks for joining us on The Connection Show. Let's connect now. Let's restore, renew, and reconnect in community. Enhance connection in our online connection circles. A place to meet up, gather, and feel welcome. To join us, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Click on the Books Podcast tab, and then the Connection Circles drop down. On the pop-up, join our Connection Circles Facebook group. Our circles meet from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Share story, topics, and laughter with men and women. To learn more about Connection Circles, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Thanks for joining us on The Connection Show, and have a great day.